But I had those moments. Then when we went back home, I had my clothes I needed to unpack, and every time I'd go unpack my clothes, try and put my clothes, in the wardrobe, I just couldn't, and I just started crying, and I felt like a part of me has just gone. What did I do? Yes, I love David, and I was looking forward to a happy marriage, but I just couldn't do it, and then you helped me with the unpacking.
We became very close friends. We'd even have lunches together, and that was fun. We'd just sit down and crack jokes and find out what's going on in each other's life. So at that point, I had my own business, so he was like, so what's going on? Give me a couple of leads. It was fun. It was fun. At no point did I feel that, I'm under the spotlight and I must answer and, that kind of thing.
Yeah. My dad has so much influence. If my dad probably came up and told me, I don't like David, think twice about the relationship you have with David, I'd have dropped David. He has a lot of influence in my life. So just seeing him getting so close with David, it made me feel like, yeah, David is the right man for me, and my dad approves. So it did make a big difference.
I'm going to be very lovey-dovey over my girls, definitely. Because I love children.
Yeah.
I want to have one girl, maybe 2 boys. And I want to do everything with them. I want to play with them. I want to be there with them, growing with them. Yeah, so I'm going to spoil them. In fact, we usually have an argument.
We argue about it.
We argue about that because she says that if we have a girl, I'm going to forget all about her and focus on the girl and take her shopping and buying a perfume and lipstick and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, I will, but I'll also buy you some stuff every once in a while. I mean, there's always Christmas.
Yeah, but you'll probably give her too much attention. I don't want that.
Too much attention is too little attention.
You're probably going to give her the same attention I used to get from my dad.
Yeah, I'll take her for long drives and we'll go watch movies together.
No, I don't want. I think I just want
I'll take her to the salon. Have you ever seen me in the salon?
If you don't take me, then you shouldn't take someone else.
I will. I'm going to take her. Yeah.
We're now joined again by Dr. Chris Hart to explore the daddy's girl paradigm and its effects on husbands. You just saw that. How can men like David, who are married to daddy's girls, cope with feelings of inadequacy?
It's very difficult, actually. The biggest problem for most couples is they don't realise it's going on. He feels inadequate. He feels that his wife has got expectations of him that he's not meeting. He feels dreadful as a result, but he doesn't actually know what's going on.
What's going on?
So the most important step in a couple who's involving a daddy's girl is that they know that's happening. So if they've had the good fortune to somehow stumble across the idea or to have the insight to realise that's what's happening, then they're a long way towards dealing with the issue.
Yeah. And just saving the marriage and having a happy marriage.
Yeah.
And what about Cynthia? In this situation, how can she be more sensitive to her husband's needs? Because again, it's a two-way thing.
Yes. I think what she's got to do is whenever something happens, for example, when there's an argument developing or there's a bit of tension developing, she's got to ask herself, am I really arguing with my husband here? Am I actually...
Or arguing with who?
Well, am I actually making comparisons with someone else and having an argument with someone who doesn't really exist? I'm blaming my husband for doing something which is perfectly normal. He's just an ordinary guy. He's doing what ordinary guys do. But I've got this expectation that he should be doing something different. Maybe I'm not really having this argument with my husband at all. I'm having it with this mythical person that I've set up. And he's just the poor guy who has to answer the questions.
But of course it calls for a little bit more self-knowledge, knowing yourself and knowing your limitations, knowing what it calls for that, doesn't it?
Yes, that is exactly it. And that's really the biggest problem that we all have in life, that most of us don't have that insight. Most of us just go through life, just living from one day to the next. And 90% of us live ordinary lives, and so it doesn't matter. But when you come across these slightly unusual situations, like a real daddy's girl, insight is what gives you the ability to deal with it.
Okay, boundaries need to be set up. Daddy needs to move out of the home, even though he's not physically there, but he needs to move out of David and Cynthia's house. What boundaries does David need to set up? And Cynthia as well, because again, it's both.
You're quite right. Boundaries are important. For example, if she has a tendency to go and ask her father's advice over almost everything that's happening in the home, perhaps she should have a boundary there, that she shouldn't do that.
Start off with your husband.
Yes, actually. I mean, the first rule of marriage has to be that you put your spouse first, before everybody, your friends, your work colleagues, your family. And of course that's very difficult even in an ordinary situation. It's very difficult to say to your parents, I'm sorry, I'm actually going to pay more attention to my spouse.
Yeah.
Now imagine...
Especially if you've had this very close relationship.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it?
More difficult, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. You know, we hear about it more often in the case of the mummy's boy, you know, who can never let go of his mother, the mother-in-law. But now we're seeing the other side. This is the wife who's always paying first attention to her father. And that's very, very, very tricky in a marriage.
Yeah, so Cynthia's got to...
She has really. She's actually got to say to herself, no, there's a boundary here. I must actually have the conversation with my husband first. Or I must listen to him first. Or we must consider together what it is we're going to do. And actually leave everyone else out of the equation. It's very important to do that.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, if she doesn't, that is going to cause a huge problem.
A huge problem, yeah. Right, that's for Cynthia, one of the things that Cynthia should do. But what would you recommend to her to begin to start looking inside herself and you know, holding a mirror to herself, let me put it that way.
Yes, that's a very nice analogy. That is exactly what she's got to do. She's got to ask herself, why is she reacting the way she is to things that happen in their everyday life? And how much of this is to do with her husband, and how much of it is to do with her past.
Yes.
And being sensitive to your own past is a very considerable skill. You know, it's not something you can just switch on overnight. So she needs to start thinking that way. She needs to say, why am I sensitive about this particular issue? You know, just think back, imagine her childhood, think about her relationship with her father and so on, and see, is that where it comes from? In which case, maybe it's time to let it go.
Yeah, and of course, the minute she does let it go, she'll be able to see David for who he really is.
Absolutely.
Because this is just blurring her vision, really, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the ability to let go your childhood is one of the great steps in our lives. You know, it doesn't normally happen, unfortunately, too young. We tend to do it in our 40s.
In our 40s.
Which is a bit late, you know, the children have actually grown up.
That's why I say life begins at 40. That's where it comes from, probably.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But what about David? What does he need to do?
I think he needs to be incredibly sensitive. He needs to have this model in his mind that maybe every interaction he's having, which is going a little bit wrong, is actually involving somebody else. You know, some very famous lady once said there's always 3 people in a bed.
Yeah, who was that? Jean-Jacques Bourg?
I can't remember. Mae West or someone like that, you know.
Yeah.
And what they meant, of course, was the parent. And he needs to think whenever something is not quite right, it doesn't matter what the subject matter is, maybe there is somebody else here, that she's actually comparing the situation with someone else, and I should cut her a little bit of slack. And maybe I should drop this particular topic and we should find another way to investigate it. They've both got to become very skilled at having arguments. And they've got to start having arguments where they realise that an issue has arisen, and then they just park it and they come back to it when the temperature's gone down, and then they start a conversation along the lines of, do you think what we were arguing about was something to do with your father?
Yeah. Okay. Nice one. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's clear that fathers have a huge impact on all of us, either through their particular kind of presence or absence. Just how do you make sure that you cultivate healthy relationships? Dr. Hart tells us how next. We're now joined by Dr. Chris Hart and Becky from earlier, Rebecca. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And of course, Dr. Hart, you heard a little bit of Rebecca's story, how she feels that she's a daddy's girl, and the type of relationship she has with her father.
Yes.
What questions would you pose to her? What would you say to her?
Right, well, I think I do need to ask you 1 or 2 more questions before I can say anything. I mean, I think I heard you say in the earlier interview that you were working. Is that right?
Yeah.
So maybe you're not thinking about marriage in the next year or 2. Is that right? Yeah. But you are looking for relationships.
Yes, I am.
And have you had some successful relationships?
Not quite. Not quite.
So what goes wrong?
those men are disappointing.
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 What do you mean disappointing?
They don't not really match up to my dad or anything, but they don't. Some are not serious, others are not focused in life.
Right.
I'd want someone who thinks of a future, someone who really looks like someone who can be the head of a family.
Sure.
Yes.
Now, let me put a thought in your head. It goes like this. Your father is not unique. There are men like that out there. So what's going on is a choosing process. Yeah. Why is it that you're not finding the guys who do match up to your father? Do you see what I mean? Because when you meet a guy for the first time, there's a very good chance that you make a choice. You look at him, you look at the way he holds himself, the clothes he's wearing, how he speaks to you, and you decide whether you're going to accept a date or not. And what's happening is you're choosing the losers, aren't you? What do you think's going on there? Why are you not finding the guys who are like your father?
I am not sure. You help me out.
Well, I think what's happening is that you think your father is absolutely wonderful, and you don't, subconsciously, you don't want somebody to match up with him. So you are actually deliberately going out and choosing guys who are a bit below.
Wrong.
Yeah, they're a bit below par. You don't want a threat in that relationship with your father. Does that make sense? Because if a guy comes along who's actually as good as or better than your father, you've got a bit of a problem, haven't you?
I guess so.
Yeah. So I think that's really what's going on. You need to think about the choosing process, what it is that you look for when you see a guy for the first time. And if you recognise in him that he actually is a bit of a loser, don't even start. You know, just put him aside.
But how do you recognise that if you've just met someone? I mean, you've got years of living with your father and building up this whole thing within your mind as to who he is. How would she then be able to do that with a guy she meets somewhere and thinks, okay, he looks well groomed, he looks, he seems intelligent, articulate, and all these other wonderful qualities.
Well, it starts with where you go to meet people. I mean, I didn't ask that question, but if you're meeting young men in bars, for example, chances are they're the sort of guy who like a tipple and all that sort of thing, and they probably don't automatically meet up to your expectations. So you have to start by thinking, where do I go to meet guys who are the sort of people I want to meet? So you want to meet them at places where someone's studying or at work, the right sort of work, through friends. In other words, you want to put a screen long before you even meet them, which says, I'll only meet the best sort of guys.
But what are we saying here, though? Are we saying then that Rebecca should actually go and look for somebody who's similar to her dad? What are we saying?
I think what's happening is that she's looking subconsciously, deliberately, for someone who isn't as good as her father. Right. Now, I think she's got to do two things. She's got to think about that and decide, just what sort of guy does she really want to meet, and to accept all the problems that that's going to cause. Because for a successful relationship, your father has to become number two. No question about that.
Look at the big smile that comes in her face when you say that.
That is going to be such an issue, you see. Now, I think you do want eventually to have a husband and a family and all those sorts of things, and he has to be number one, just as he has to put you number one. So you have to find somebody who is number one. That's the first thing. You've got to choose the right guys so that you are comfortable with them. And then you've got to make that decision that he is going to be number one. So you've got to do a lot of practice. I think that's your job for the next few years. You've got to think about the relationship you have with your father, and you've got to think about the relationship you want with your husband, and you've got to practice getting there. And the one thing you've really got going for you is that you have thought about it. Actually, that's very unusual. Most people actually don't realise that they have that relationship with their father, or their mother for that matter.
Yeah.
And they don't see what it's doing to their current relationships, and they don't see the potential for the problem that might arise with their future husband. So you set off with a huge advantage, that you can actually start to think about that. And because you've got that insight, that ability to look at yourself, you're almost certainly going to succeed.
Yeah. You're one step ahead. Okay. You're one step ahead. It's all good. Okay. We'll be right back. Josephine is back with us, and of course, Dr. Hart, you heard her talking about her 20 criteria.
I love that.
I know, I thought it was
really
brilliant too. Yeah. But what else would you have to say to Josephine?
Well, let me do what I did before, which is to ask you one or two questions. Let me check that I heard everything right. You're working.
Yeah.
You're recently married.
Yeah.
You have a small baby. Right. Now, did you have any previous relationships?
Yes, I did.
Serious ones, I mean.
Yeah, I
so
did.
How did they go?
The first one, I had to end it because he was drinking too much. I couldn't take it.
He was drinking too much?
Yeah. And I was still in campus, and I thought, I can't take this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
The second one, it was a distance one, and I was not willing to relocate.
Okay.
So we had to end it.
So how long did you go out with your present husband before you actually made the decision?
3 years.
Right. So you got to know him really well.
Yes, and to test him quite.
Yes.
Yeah, going back to that question. How did he score?
I was not
scale?
testing him. Oh, that
on
scale of mine.
On the scale, yeah.
About 90.
About 90.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're like, you know, you've given yourself room. You can give or take a little bit. You're not going to find your 100%.
I know that's not possible.
You know, strangely enough, what you did, creating that list, was a very clever thing to do. And it's actually something I advise people to do.
Okay.
But I always advise them to aim for 70%, not 90, because it's so difficult to get up to the top.
But see, also the ratings were high. It's 5, a score of 5 for every, like, is he God-fearing? That's 5.
Right,
is he a gentle person? Is he funny, you know?
Yeah. Now, you know, the biggest danger you face, actually, is that as you get older, you change. You change, he changes. Your circumstances change. The more children, maybe, you get more tired. Lots of things. And all of a sudden, that list doesn't work quite so well. So I wonder if you've thought about the possibility that in years to come, you're going to have to be very tolerant of the fact that he no longer meets those criteria. What do you think?
I've thought about that, and actually for me it's the circumstances that keep changing, because I expect, people tell you, like, when you have a small baby, he'll start staying out late, he doesn't want to, you know, the baby's crying and all. So I am expecting now he'll start staying out late.
Yes.
But instead he stays in longer. In fact, he wants to help with the baby, he wants to wake up at night and feed him.
Yes,
so
you're obviously very lucky, and you obviously did choose this guy very well, but you've also just touched on another issue that's likely to arise, which is that you're always watching for potential problems. You imagine the sort of things that are going to happen. Because you didn't have a father in the house, there is a hidden fear in your mind that actually you might be deserted. So you'll actually watch that poor lad like a hawk.
Do you do that? Do you watch him? Do you?
Maybe not consciously, but I think so. Because I find myself thinking, oh, okay, so he actually proved me wrong yet again. You know, I've had those moments. Yeah, like 3 times now. Big, huge issues, I think now.
He's gone.
Leaving. Pretty damn good.
Yeah, but that is quite a serious problem, because you can imagine you will start having rows with him about things he hasn't done. In other words, he'll be late coming home, and he's actually got a good reason for being late. But you think he's been up to no good because you're a little bit sensitive about
it. So you become
I think
overly
about
suspicious.
that, I know him very well, no? So I think I know him fairly well, so I try to be also reasonable.
Well, can you see how the two things work together? As time passes, you won't know each other quite so well. You'll change. And then you won't be quite so confident about what he does when he's home late or something like that. And so you will end up having a few arguments with one another who, they're not really arguments with you two, they're arguments about you and your ideal.
Yeah.
And you just need to have that thought in your mind. Otherwise, you've obviously really gone into this with a very thorough way. You're a tax auditor, aren't
I know,
you?
she's a tax auditor. We just found that out. I mean, it was just like it adds to it as well. Now, yeah,
probably
makes
also
total
auditing,
sense. Yeah, absolutely everything.
But
so what I think I'm really saying is you need to cut this guy a little bit of slack as the years go by. And
yourself.
Yes.
And yourself.
Yes.
Because you're constantly holding yourself on edge, thinking, okay, is this what he's doing, or is that what he's doing, or does this what it mean? Is this what it means?
Can you see how you're being a bit of a perfectionist?
Yeah. But
he's meeting your expectations.
He is, and he tries to tell me that relax, life is not so tense.
Yes. Can you see how that might get to be quite a problem in years to come? You know, he might suddenly start to feel very much on edge because he's constantly being marked against this score sheet. And sometimes he wants to be a slob. I mean, look at the way I dress, you know, and the way you dress. I mean, that's. Do you see what I mean?
And it's okay.
He needs to be a slob sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. But I'm not scared to get help when I think I need help. Like I've had to go for counselling from time to time.
Well, that's very good, and that's a very good thing to do. And I sense that you and he talk a lot together.
Oh yes, we do.
Well, you see, you're 90% there if you can talk about things like this, and especially if you can do it with a small smile on your face sometimes.
That smile helps. A smile really helps.
I'll try.
So Josephine, thank you very much for coming in, and Dr. Hart, as ever.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Today's show has shed light on the world of daddy's girls and how society views them differently. Now, if you are a daddy's girl or not, it's up to you to make the right choice in your life and make the best out of it. Thanks to today's guests for sharing their stories with us. Send in your thoughts and comments on the show to the address on your screen, and it's bye-bye for now.